Hey, my name's James, and I just turned 60. I've never been the type to share my personal life online, but after what happened at my birthday party, I need to get this off my chest. Maybe someone out there will understand. Maybe someone has been through something similar. Or maybe I just need to write it all down before I do something I regret. I always imagined my 60th would be a quiet celebration. A nice dinner, a few drinks, maybe even a heartfelt speech from one of my kids. Instead, my oldest son, Ethan, turned it into a public humiliation. I should have seen it coming. A few months ago, Ethan reached out and offered to plan the whole thing. That alone should have been a red flag. We hadn't been close in years. Not since the divorce. Not since my ex-wife, Linda, made sure the kids saw me as the villain. I thought time would fix things, but time just gave them more reasons to resent me. Still, when Ethan called, I wanted to believe things were getting better. Dad, he said, his voice unusually warm. You're turning 60. That's huge. Let us take care of it. It felt good to hear him say, us. My three sons, Ethan, Ryan, and Caleb, had been distant for so long. I missed them. So against my better judgment, I let them handle everything. I even let Ethan book the venue. That was my first mistake. The party was held at a fancy event hall, the kind of place reserved for weddings and retirement celebrations. The guest list was bigger than I expected, old friends, distant relatives, even Linda was there, smiling like she owned the place. Something about that smile put me on edge, but I pushed the feeling down. I should have listened to my gut. The night started off fine. Drinks were flowing, small talk was easy, and for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged. Then Ethan took the stage. All right, everyone, he said, tapping the microphone. Tonight is all about celebrating a man who has, well, let's just say, had an interesting life. People chuckled. I forced a smile. Maybe it was just a little roast. A harmless joke. I couldn't have been more wrong. The lights dimmed, and a projector flickered on behind him. A video started playing. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then the narration started. My ex-wife's voice. He failed as a husband, failed as a father, and failed as a man. Laughter. Real, genuine laughter from the crowd. I sat frozen as photo after photo flashed across the screen. My old house, the day I moved out with nothing but a suitcase, the courtroom where Linda took everything, even a grainy clip of me drunk at a family reunion years ago. The audience was eating it up. The final clip was Ethan himself, standing in front of a courthouse. And with that, he said, I'm officially changing my last name. None of us want to be associated with James Turner anymore. The room erupted. Cheering. Clapping. Even my youngest son, Caleb, who used to cling to my leg as a kid, was grinning like this was the best night of his life. I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give out. I could have yelled. I could have demanded an explanation. But instead, I did the only thing that felt right. I stood up, raised my glass. Thanks for coming, I said. Then I walked out. That was last night. This morning, my phone hasn't stopped vibrating. Messages from family, old friends, even Ethan himself. Now they're sorry. Now they want to talk. But I'm done talking. I've spent my whole life being the guy who takes the hits and keeps moving. But this was the last straw. They wanted to humiliate me? Fine. Now it's my turn. I spent the rest of the night alone in my apartment, sitting in the dark with a glass of whiskey in my hand, staring at my phone as it buzzed over and over again. Messages flooded in, apologies, excuses, even a few half-hearted attempts at justifying what they did. At first, I ignored them. Then, as the messages kept coming, I realized something. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry because they finally understood what they had lost. It all started when my lawyer, Mr. Reynolds, made a phone call. See, what my sons never knew, what nobody in that room knew, was that I wasn't just some washed-up old man scraping by after the divorce. I had played the long game. When Linda took me to court all those years ago, she got nearly everything. The house, the savings, even half my retirement. I walked away with almost nothing. That's what they all assumed, at least. But what they didn't realize was that losing everything forced me to start over. And I did. For the past 20 years, I had been building something for myself. I started my own business, small at first, just a consulting gig that paid the bills. But I was patient. I invested smartly, made connections, and expanded. Eventually, my company took off, and I sold it for more money than I ever thought I'd see in my lifetime. I never flaunted my wealth. I lived in a modest apartment, drove an old truck, and let everyone believe I was just getting by. Even my sons never bothered to ask. They had already written me off as a failure. That is, until Mr. Reynolds called them. I had planned to leave everything to them, split evenly, no questions asked. I never held a grudge. I figured that, despite everything, they were still my sons. But after what they did at my birthday party, that changed everything. I had called Mr. Reynolds the moment I got home, still buzzing from the humiliation, still hearing Linda's voice mocking me over the speakers. "Take them out of the will," I said. He didn't hesitate. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. And while you're at it, let them know." That's why they were sorry now. By morning, they had all gotten the news. Ethan, Ryan, and Caleb, the same sons who had laughed in my face, who had publicly disowned me, were now frantically trying to reach me. The first call came from Ethan. I let it go to voicemail. Then Ryan. Then Caleb. Then Ethan again. The texts were even better. Ethan texted, "Dad, we need to talk. Please call me." Ryan texted, "I think we should clear the air. What happened at the party was just a joke." Caleb texted, "Dad, I didn't know about the video. I swear, I didn't think it would be that bad." That one almost made me laugh. That bad. The kid was standing right there, cheering along with the rest of them. Then came the kicker. Linda herself. She never texted me. Ever. But there it was, her name flashing across my screen. Linda texted, "James, the boys told me what you did. We need to talk." I turned my phone off and smiled for the first time in a long time. Let them panic. Let them feel what it's like to be discarded, to be treated as nothing more than an afterthought. I wasn't done yet. I left my phone off for the rest of the day, enjoying the silence for once. No buzzing, no desperate calls, no fake apologies. Just peace. But by the next morning, I was greeted by something new. They were at my door. A frantic, desperate knocking jolted me awake. It wasn't a polite tap. It was the kind of pounding that said they weren't leaving without answers. I already knew who it was. I took my time getting up, pouring myself a cup of coffee, savoring the quiet before I opened the door. And there they were, Ethan, Ryan, and Caleb, standing in the hallway of my apartment building, looking more uncomfortable than I'd ever seen them. Ethan, always the ringleader, was the first to speak. "Dad," he started, his voice already carrying that forced warmth I'd grown used to. "Can we talk?" I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the silence hang in the air before responding. "About what?" Ethan exchanged a look with Ryan and Caleb, as if they were deciding who would say it. Ryan finally caved. "We heard from your lawyer." And I said, my voice flat. Ethan forced a chuckle, rubbing the back of his neck like this was all just some misunderstanding. "Look, Dad, we know you're upset about the party." I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Upset?" I repeated, tilting my head slightly. "No, Ethan, I wasn't upset. I was humiliated. You didn't just roast me. You made a spectacle out of my worst moments. You had your mother narrate my failures like it was some kind of twisted documentary. And then you all sat there and laughed. None of them had anything to say to that." Caleb, my youngest, finally spoke up, his voice quieter. "Dad, I didn't know it was going to be that bad. I thought it was just..." He stopped himself, probably realizing how pathetic that excuse sounded. I nodded. "Right. You didn't know. But you still clapped, didn't you? You still laughed when Ethan announced he was dropping my last name like it was trash." Ethan winced, but he quickly recovered. "Dad, we were drinking. It was just a bad joke, okay? We didn't mean..." "You meant every word," I interrupted. "And that's fine. You don't want to be my sons anymore? Great. Then you won't be." Ryan stepped forward, his expression shifting from guilt to desperation. "Dad, please. You can't do this. We're family." I let out a sharp laugh. "Now we're family? That's funny, because when you stood there and let your mother drag my name through the mud, I wasn't family then. When you changed your last name, I wasn't family then. But now that you've found out you're not getting a dime, suddenly I'm dad again." Ethan, realizing their usual tactics weren't working, tried a different approach. "All right, look, maybe we went too far. We get it. We're sorry, okay? But cutting us out completely? Come on, Dad, that's extreme." I took another slow sip of my coffee. "Is it?" Ryan threw his hands up. "Yes. Dad, this isn't fair. You have millions. What are we supposed to do?" And there it was. The real reason they were here. Not because they felt guilty. Not because they regretted what they did. Because they needed my money. I stepped forward, lowering my voice. "That's not my problem." Ethan's face twisted in frustration. Dad, we're your kids. No, I said calmly. You made it clear at that party that I wasn't your father. You're Linda's sons. You're her boys. So why don't you go ask her for money? Caleb, looking panicked, tried one last attempt. His voice cracked. Dad, please. I just bought a house. I have loans. I was counting on that money. I didn't let him finish. You should have counted on me instead. Silence. Ethan, for the first time, looked genuinely nervous. Like he was realizing, too late, that this wasn't a game. All right, he said, voice tight with frustration. Fine. If this is how you want to be, then don't expect us to come crawling back when you change your mind. I smiled. Good. I won't. I turned and stepped back into my apartment, gripping the door handle. Ryan made one last attempt. Dad. I shut the door in their faces. I stood there for a long moment, listening as they whispered to each other, trying to figure out what to do next. Eventually, their voices faded, their footsteps retreating down the hall. Only then did I exhale. For years, I let them treat me like I was nothing. I took the hits, hoping one day they'd see me differently. But now I knew the truth. They never cared. Not about me. Not about the sacrifices I made. They only cared about what I could give them. And now, they would get nothing. I didn't hear from them again that day. Or the next. For the first time in years, my phone was silent. No fake apologies. No guilt tripping. Just peace. But I knew better than to think it was over. And I was right. 3 days later, there was another knock at my door. Lighter this time. Hesitant. I didn't answer. Then came the texts. Caleb texted, Dad, please. I don't know what to do. Can we talk? Ryan texted, we messed up, okay? Just give us a chance to fix this. Ethan texted, you're really going to throw away your own family over a stupid party? That last one made me shake my head. Ethan still didn't get it. To him, this was just a tantrum, something I'd eventually get over. But I wasn't going to. Then, a message from Linda. Linda texted, James. We need to talk. It's about the boys. I rolled my eyes. Of course she was getting involved now. She probably thought she could manipulate me like she used to. I ignored them all. That night, I went out to dinner, alone, for once, without the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. I let myself enjoy a steak, a drink, the quiet hum of a restaurant where no one looked at me like I was a failure. But when I got home, I found something that made me angry. A note. Slipped under my door. Dad, we're outside. Please talk to us. They were here. I took a deep breath, my jaw tightening. They just didn't know when to quit. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain back. Sure enough, all three of them were standing there by the parking lot, looking lost and desperate. Caleb was pacing. Ryan had his arms crossed, rubbing his temples. Ethan, always the ringleader, was leaned against his car, staring at his phone, probably texting another guilt trip I'd never read. For a moment, I considered ignoring them. But no, it was time to end this. I grabbed my coat, stepped outside, and made my way down the steps. The moment they saw me, Caleb's face lit up with hope. Dad, he called, already walking toward me. I held up a hand. No, we're doing this my way now. That stopped him in his tracks. Ethan straightened up. Dad, we just want to talk. I folded my arms. Talk then. Caleb swallowed hard. Look, I was wrong. We all were. We shouldn't have done that to you. I should have stood up for you. But I was scared of looking weak in front of them. I didn't say anything. Ryan sighed. Dad, we don't want your money. We just... Stop, I interrupted. You do want my money. And that's fine. But I want you to say it. Say it out loud. Be honest for once in your lives. They hesitated. Then Ethan scoffed. Fine. Yeah, we want the money. Obviously. But we also want our father back. I tilted my head. You want your father back? You mean the one you humiliated in front of 100 people? The one you disowned in public? That father. Ethan clenched his jaw. It was a joke, Dad. I laughed, actually laughed. No, a joke is when everyone finds it funny. What you did, that was a funeral. My funeral. You buried me that night. And you expected me to just lie there and take it. Caleb looked like he wanted to cry. Dad, please. Just, what do we have to do to make this right? I let the silence drag out before speaking. Nothing. Ryan frowned. What? There's nothing you can do, I said simply. This isn't a test. There's no magic phrase that makes this go away. You made your choice. And I'm making mine. Caleb shook his head. Dad, you can't do this. Yes, I can, I said firmly. I already have. Ethan's face darkened. So that's it. You're just going to cut us off forever. I took a deep breath, looking at each of them. My sons, my family, and I felt nothing. You cut me off first. Ethan threw up his hands, letting out a bitter laugh. Unbelievable. You finally get some money, and suddenly you're too good for us. I shook my head. It was never about the money, Ethan. It was about respect. Something you never gave me. Ryan, the calmest of the three, took a step forward. Dad, let's just take some time, okay? Maybe we can meet in a week. Just dinner. No talk about the will. I stared at him. Did you apologize to me before you knew about the money? He hesitated. That's what I thought. Then, I turned and walked away. Caleb called after me, his voice breaking. Dad, please. I don't want your money. I just don't want to lose you. I stopped in my tracks. For a brief second, I felt something. The old instinct to forgive. To be the father they wanted. But then I remembered that night. The laughter. The humiliation. I kept walking, and I didn't look back. I walked back inside, locked the door, and exhaled. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I felt free. For the first time in decades, I had no obligations to anyone who didn't deserve my kindness. No more forced smiles. No more pretending everything was fine. I had drawn the line, and they had finally seen it. But I knew they weren't done yet. The texts continued that night. Caleb was the only one still pleading. He sent long messages about how he missed me, how he regretted everything, how he would do anything to fix this. Ryan sent fewer texts but tried a logical approach, asking for another conversation, saying, there must be a way forward. Ethan, predictably, went full rage mode, accusing me of being a selfish old man who only cared about winning. I didn't reply to a single one. And then, 2 days later, the real desperation set in. Caleb showed up at my office. I was coming back from lunch when I saw him sitting on a bench outside the building, head down, hands clasped. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. When he saw me, he stood up so quickly he nearly tripped. Dad, please, just 5 minutes. I sighed. Caleb, I know. You don't want to hear it. But please, just let me say my piece. I crossed my arms. You already did. At my party. In front of everyone. He flinched, guilt plain on his face. I was a fool. We were all stupid. I should have stopped them. I should have walked away. But I didn't. And I hate myself for it. I didn't say anything. His voice cracked. I swear, I don't care about the money, Dad. I just don't want to lose you. You're my father. And he ran a hand through his hair, voice dropping to a whisper. I don't want to live with this regret. That almost got me. Almost. But then I thought about all the years of indifference. The times he let Ethan mock me without stepping in. The way he let Linda poison their minds against me. He wasn't innocent. He was just the least cruel. I sighed. Caleb, I believe you regret it. I really do. But regret isn't enough. You don't get to humiliate someone and then act shocked when they walk away. He swallowed hard. Dad, I don't know how to fix this. I nodded. You don't. His face crumpled. For a moment, I thought he might break down completely. Instead, he just nodded. Okay, he murmured. I get it. And for the first time in his life, he actually did. I turned and walked past him into the building. He didn't follow me. That was the last time I saw Caleb in person. But Ethan? He wasn't done yet. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. Not from him. Oh no, that would have been too mature. It was from a lawyer. Apparently, Ethan believed he had some sort of claim to my estate, despite the fact that I was still very much alive. He cited verbal agreements, which didn't exist, and unfulfilled parental obligations, which was rich, considering he was 30. He even had the audacity to say that excluding him from my will was emotional abuse. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. I forwarded the letter to my own lawyer and told him to handle it however he saw fit. He sent back a one-line response to Ethan's lawyer. My client is under no legal or moral obligation to include your client in his will. This matter is closed. I never heard from Ethan again. Ryan reached out once more. A single text. I won't bother you again. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I mean that. I didn't reply. And that was it. No grand reconciliation. No dramatic final confrontation. Just silence. I won't lie and say it didn't hurt. These were my sons. I had raised them, loved them, sacrificed for them. And in the end, they had thrown me away like I was nothing. But you know what? I still had a life. A good life. I traveled. I picked up old hobbies I had long abandoned. I reconnected with old friends who actually appreciated me. And for the first time in decades, I woke up every morning with no weight on my chest. I was free, and I never looked back. So what do you guys think? Was I too harsh? Or was this the only way to finally get the respect I deserved? I'm Alex, 27 now, but this story really started when I was a kid. I grew up knowing exactly where I stood in my family, at the bottom. My parents never bothered to hide it. My older brother, Ethan, was the golden child. Everything he did was perfect, even when it wasn't. He got away with skipping school, wrecking my dad's car when he was 16, and even getting arrested once for shoplifting. My parents? They bailed him out, laughed it off, and blamed his troubled genius mind. Me? I got grounded for getting a B in math. I used to think maybe I was imagining it, that maybe all siblings felt like their parents favored one child. But no, my parents made it crystal clear. When I was 10, I asked my mom why Ethan got a laptop for his birthday, and I got a sweater. She didn't even blink when she said, "Because he's special. You're not the favorite. Deal with it." That was their favorite phrase. Deal with it. At 12, I stopped asking for things. At 16, I stopped trying to impress them. And by the time I left for college, I had accepted that no matter what I did, I would never be enough for them. But the real breaking point didn't come until a year ago. It started with my grandfather's will. He passed away when I was 26, and to my complete shock, he left nearly everything to me. My grandfather and I had always been close. He used to tell me, "Alex, you're the only one in this family with a good head on your shoulders." But I never expected him to actually leave me his house, his savings, and his old car, everything he had. Ethan got nothing. The moment the will was read, the temperature in the room dropped. My mom turned to the lawyer and actually asked if there had been some sort of mistake. Ethan was sitting there, mouth open, looking like someone had just run over his dog. And my dad? He was quiet at first. Then, in the car ride home, he suddenly said, "You know what the right thing to do is?" I just stared at him. "The right thing? You give Ethan half." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. They spent the next 3 weeks calling, texting, and guilt-tripping me. My mom cried about how Ethan was struggling and needed this more than I did. My dad tried the whole family legacy angle. "Ethan? He just sent me texts like you don't even need it. Stop being selfish." It wasn't about the money for them. It was about the fact that, for the first time in my life, I had something they wanted, and they couldn't stand it. The worst part? They had never cared about my grandfather when he was alive. They visited him maybe twice a year, always on holidays, just to keep up appearances. But now, suddenly, his money was their business. So, after a month of constant pressure, I cut them off. Completely. I blocked their numbers, deleted them from social media, and changed the locks on my grandfather's house, where I had moved in. It wasn't easy. There were moments where I felt guilty, moments where I almost caved. But then I'd remember all the years of being treated like I didn't matter. They hadn't cared about me when I was growing up. They only cared now that I had something they wanted. And then, a year passed. A peaceful, quiet year where I started living my own life. Until last week. I was coming home from work, exhausted, when I saw them. My parents. Standing on my porch. And they weren't alone. Ethan was there too, looking smug, and behind them was a woman I didn't recognize, a lawyer. Maybe? My mom's face lit up when she saw me, as if the last year had never happened. "Oh, sweetheart. We were just waiting for you." My dad, standing stiffly, nodded. "We need to talk." And Ethan? He just grinned, like he already knew what was coming next. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. I had no idea what they wanted this time, but I knew it wasn't good. I stopped at the bottom of my porch steps, gripping my keys so hard they left marks in my palm. My parents were acting like nothing had happened, like they hadn't spent a year trying to manipulate me into giving up what my grandfather had left me. I glanced at Ethan. He had that smug, lazy grin he always wore when he thought he had already won. "I don't think we have anything to talk about," I said flatly. My mom gasped, clutching her chest like I had just stabbed her. "Alex, is that any way to talk to your mother?" My dad took a step forward, hands shoved deep into his pockets. "This is serious. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't important." I raised an eyebrow. "Right. Because the last time I heard from you, it was nonstop messages about how I should give Ethan half of my inheritance. And when that didn't work, you all went silent." I looked at them each in turn, my voice cold. "So what changed?" Ethan scoffed. "Are you done being dramatic?" I turned to him. "Are you done being entitled?" His smirk twitched, but before he could snap back, the woman standing behind them finally spoke. She was tall, in her 40s maybe, with sharp eyes and a black blazer that screamed lawyer. "Mr. Carter," she said smoothly, like she was used to defusing tense situations. I'm Miss Holloway. Your parents have asked me to mediate a conversation regarding the estate left by your grandfather. I blinked. There's nothing to mediate. Miss Holloway ignored that and pulled out a folder. Your parents believe there may have been an error in the will. They'd like to discuss a fair redistribution. I laughed. I actually laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. An error. My mom immediately stepped in. Sweetheart, you have to understand, your grandfather was very old, and he wasn't always in the best state of mind. He might not have been thinking clearly when he wrote that will. I clenched my jaw. He was in a better state of mind than you ever gave him credit for. Ethan groaned, rubbing his face. Look, this is ridiculous. You're living in a house you don't even deserve. You're sitting on money you didn't earn. Meanwhile, I've been struggling, and you don't even care. I tilted my head. Struggling? Ethan wasn't struggling. He had a cushy job at some marketing firm, one that my dad had pulled strings to get him. He still lived in his fancy apartment downtown, drove a car that cost more than my entire college tuition, and spent his weekends partying. What exactly are you struggling with? I asked, crossing my arms. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's not the point. No, I think it is. I turned to my parents. You're actually trying to contest the will? My dad exhaled sharply. We don't want it to come to that. But Alex, think about it. Ethan's your brother. We're your family. All we're asking for is some fairness. Fairness? My voice was rising now. Where was fairness when you spent my entire childhood reminding me that I wasn't your favorite? Where was fairness when I had to work twice as hard just to get a fraction of the attention you handed Ethan on a silver platter? My mom sniffled. We didn't mean to make you feel that way. I shook my head. You meant every word. And now, because you didn't get what you wanted, you're trying to rewrite history. Miss Holloway cleared her throat. Mr. Carter, your parents are willing to settle this amicably. They simply want a fair division of assets. I turned to her, my voice deadly calm. And if I say no? She hesitated. Then they may have to take legal action. I exhaled slowly, forcing my heartbeat to steady. You know what's funny? I said after a moment. For the first time in my life, I have something you can't control. And you hate it. That's what this is really about. Ethan rolled his eyes. God, just stop playing the victim, and I stepped forward, cutting him off. You are not stepping foot in this house. I pointed at my parents. None of you are. I turned to Ms. Holloway. Tell them to file whatever paperwork they want. I'll be waiting. And with that, I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and shut it in their faces. I barely made it to the couch before my hands started shaking. They were actually trying to take this to court. I sat there for a long time, staring at the front door like it might burst open at any second. My whole body was tense, my mind running 100 miles per hour. Could they actually do this? Contest the will? I grabbed my laptop and started researching. Turns out, contesting a will wasn't easy. They'd have to prove my grandfather was mentally incompetent when he wrote it, or that he was somehow pressured into leaving everything to me. But I knew for a fact that wouldn't hold up in court. My grandfather had been sharp until the very end. He'd updated his will just 6 months before he passed, completely on his own, with a lawyer he trusted. But the fact that they were willing to go this far, that was what really got to me. After everything, after years of treating me like I was nothing, my parents and Ethan still expected me to hand over what was mine. And when I didn't, they went straight to threats. Well, if they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I half expected my parents to show up again, or for Ethan to send another smug text. But there was nothing. It was unsettling. Then, a week later, I got the letter. A thick envelope in the mail. The return address? A law firm. I ripped it open, my stomach twisting. Inside was an official notice. My parents and Ethan were formally contesting my grandfather's will. I let out a slow breath. They were really doing it. The document claimed my grandfather had been influenced by me and that the will didn't reflect his true intentions. They were asking for the court to either divide the inheritance evenly, or, more insultingly, to give it all to Ethan, because, as the eldest son, he was always meant to inherit the family assets. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Me? Influencing my grandfather? If anything, I had never even talked to him about his will. He had made his decision on his own, probably after years of watching how my parents treated me versus Ethan. I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking. This was going to court. I wasted no time. I called the lawyer who had handled my grandfather's estate. When I explained the situation, she sighed. I had a feeling this might happen, she said. Your parents were not pleased when they heard the will was ironclad. Can they actually win? I asked. She hesitated. Unlikely, but it depends. If they can convince a judge that your grandfather was manipulated or mentally unfit, they could get some traction. It would still be an uphill battle for them, but it'll cost you time and money to fight it. I gritted my teeth. Of course, that was probably part of their plan, to drag me into court, force me to waste money on legal fees, and wear me down until I caved. They weren't just after the money. This was about control, about punishing me for stepping out of my place. Well, I said, they're in for a surprise. Because if they wanted a war, I was ready to go nuclear. The first thing I did was go through every document my grandfather had left behind. His will, his medical records, his bank statements, everything. I wanted to be ready for anything they threw at me. And the more I dug, the more I realized something. My parents were broke, or at least close to it. They had always acted rich. My dad had a decent job, my mom liked to show off at charity events, and Ethan lived like he had an endless trust fund. But as I looked through old bank records my grandfather had kept, I noticed something disturbing. My parents had been taking loans. Lots of them. Credit lines. Refinancing the house. Cash advances. I sat back, my heart pounding. This wasn't just about greed. This was desperation. That's why they needed my inheritance so badly. Not just for Ethan, but to bail themselves out. And suddenly, I had an idea. A way to turn the tables on them completely. The next time I heard from them was through their lawyer. They wanted a settlement. Basically, they were offering to drop the case if I gave them a reasonable portion of the inheritance. My lawyer called me after reviewing their offer. They're asking for 60%, she said, almost laughing. I shook my head. Unbelievable. They're trying to act like they're being generous, she continued. But honestly, this just makes them look worse. It shows they don't actually believe they can win in court. I grinned. Then let's make sure they lose. I told her to reject the settlement. And then I made a few phone calls of my own. I dug deep into their finances. I found out just how much they owed, how many late payments they had, how they were on the verge of losing everything. Then, I sent an anonymous tip to some financial reporters about a certain well-known family living beyond their means. A few weeks later, an article dropped about local families drowning in debt, living fake wealthy lifestyles. And guess whose names were in it? My parents. The moment the article went public, they panicked. My dad's work found out. My mom's social circle turned on her. Ethan, his image was ruined. And that was before the court case even started. They wanted to play dirty? I had barely begun. The fallout from the article was immediate and brutal. My parents had spent decades curating their image as a wealthy, well-respected family. My mother thrived on her reputation in high society circles, and my father built his career on the illusion of financial stability. But now, their dirty laundry was out in the open for everyone to see. The article didn't just expose their debt, it revealed just how deep the hole was. The loans, the unpaid bills, the second mortgage they had taken out to maintain their perfect lifestyle. Even Ethan's reckless spending habits were put under a microscope. I knew my mother would be devastated. She cared more about appearances than anything. But what really made me smirk was picturing Ethan's reaction. He had always acted like he was untouchable, like money would always magically appear for him. Now, the world saw him for what he really was, an entitled, spoiled brat who had burned through everything his parents had. And the best part? This wasn't even my final move. I expected my parents to come running back, to demand an explanation, to throw another tantrum. Instead, they went quiet. Too quiet. For the next few weeks, I waited for their next move, but all I got were whispers from distant relatives. My aunt called me out of the blue, pretending to check in, but I could tell she was fishing for information. Your mother is going through a lot right now, she said, voice tight. Maybe you should reach out. I nearly laughed. Reach out. I repeated. You mean the same woman who just tried to sue me for my own inheritance? She was hurt, my aunt said, and I could practically hear the mental gymnastics. This has been hard for all of them. I let the silence drag until she got the hint. The next day, I got a text from Ethan. Ethan texted, "Hope you're happy. You ruined mom and dad's lives." I replied, "No, they did that to themselves. I just stopped covering for them." Ethan texted, "Grandpa would be ashamed of you." I clenched my jaw. That one stung. Not because it was true, but because I knew exactly what Ethan was doing. He had always been good at guilt-tripping me. For years, he had used our parents' words as weapons, making me feel small, making me question myself. But this time, It didn't work. I replied, Grandpa left everything to me for a reason. He saw through the lies. Maybe you should too. No response. Typical. Then came the court date. I arrived with my lawyer, dressed sharp but calm. My parents were already seated, looking significantly worse than the last time I saw them. My mother's usual elegance was gone, her makeup looked rushed, and the stress lines around her mouth were deeper. My father looked stiff, his hands clasped so tightly they were turning white. Ethan, on the other hand, looked furious, like a kid who had been told Christmas was canceled. As I sat down, my mother turned to me, her voice low but dripping with venom. Are you proud of yourself? I met her gaze evenly. Are you? Before she could answer, the judge walked in, and the case began. Their lawyer opened with some half-hearted argument about how my grandfather had been pressured by me, that he hadn't been in his right mind when he changed the will. But the moment my lawyer stood up, she shredded their claims apart with cold, hard facts. She pulled out signed medical reports from my grandfather's doctors, all confirming his mental sharpness. She presented records of his independent meetings with his attorney, proving that he had made his decisions without coercion. Then came the real kicker. She showed a letter. A personal letter my grandfather had written to me before he passed. It wasn't legally necessary, but it was the final nail in the coffin. In it, he explained his decision. He had seen how my parents treated me. He had watched Ethan grow up into someone who felt entitled to everything but worked for nothing. He wanted me to have the resources to build my own life, free from their influence. When I glanced at my parents, my mother had gone pale. My father's jaw was clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. Ethan? He looked betrayed, as if it had never even occurred to him that Grandpa might have actually cared about me more than him. The judge ruled in my favor. The will was upheld. They had lost. After the ruling, I expected an explosion, a screaming match, some final desperate attempt to claw something back. Instead, they just left. No words, no final threats, just silence. I didn't hear from them for months. Not a call, not a text, not even some passive-aggressive email from my mother. It was eerie. At first, I thought maybe, just maybe, they had finally given up, that they had accepted their loss and moved on. I should have known better. One night, I was coming home late from work when I noticed a car parked across the street from my apartment. Black sedan, tinted windows. It had been there a few times before, but I brushed it off as coincidence. That night, though, as I walked up my front steps, the driver's side window rolled down. And there was Ethan. He looked rough, unshaven, hollow-eyed, his usual smug arrogance replaced with something desperate. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me. I turned to unlock my door. Wait. His voice cracked. Just talk to me for a second. I sighed, crossing my arms. What do you want, Ethan? He swallowed hard. They're gone. I blinked. What? Mom and Dad. They left. His fingers clenched on the steering wheel. After the lawsuit, things got worse. The debts caught up. They burned through everything. The house got foreclosed on last month. I frowned. And Ethan let out a bitter laugh. And they ran, packed up whatever they could and disappeared. No forwarding address. No goodbyes. Nothing. He exhaled sharply. They left me with everything. The collectors, the mess. Just abandoned me. I studied him carefully. For the first time in his life, Ethan was experiencing what I had grown up with, being left behind, being treated as disposable. And it was breaking him. He rubbed his face. I don't know what to do, man. I'm drowning. A long silence stretched between us. And then I said, that's not my problem. His head snapped up. Come on, don't be like that. We're family. No, I said coldly. We're not. Family doesn't treat each other the way you did. Family doesn't stand by while one person is treated like garbage just because it benefits them. Ethan's jaw tightened. I didn't have a choice. You always had a choice, I shot back. And you always chose them. He stared at me, chest rising and falling rapidly. I could see the anger bubbling just beneath the surface, the frustration that, for the first time ever, his words weren't working on me. I turned toward my door. Good luck, Ethan. You're gonna need it. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me. Through the peephole, I watched him sit there for a few minutes, gripping the steering wheel, breathing heavily. Then, without another word, he drove away. That was the last time I ever saw him. I don't know where my parents went. I don't care. They built their lives on lies, on manipulation, on using people and throwing them away. And in the end, they did the same thing to their golden child. Poetic, isn't it?